أنا بآمن إنه النزاع الفلسطيني الإسرائيلي ما بدأ من اليوم، ولا بدأ قبل 60 سنة بال 1948، إلا إنه بدأ من بداية سيدنا إبراهيم لما اختار يتجوز ستنا هاجر، وأجا الواد الأول إسماعيل، بعدين ستنا سارة جابت إسحاق، وكان النساء الثنتين يتكاتلوا على نفس الرجل، وكان في سبب للنزاع اللي هو الرجل. إذا بنشوف على عصرنا اليوم بنلاقي نفس عيلة إبراهيم ونفس أولاد سارة وأولاد هاجر عم يتكاتلوا بس على إشي اسمه أرض، يعني كانوا اسم إبراهيم وحطوا أرض اللي كان مفروض سيدنا إبراهيم يدخلها، وهون صار في نزاع بالأولاد. ومن هون بقول إنه يمكن بعد 100 سنة ما نلاقي إنه بتكاتلوا فلسطين وإسرائيل على الأرض، يمكن بتكاتلوا على طلوت.
Our mother, Sarah, we learned that she died because a servant came back from Mount Moriah where he saw Abraham was taking Yitzhak to sacrifice him. Abraham took Isaac to be sacrificed. And in our tradition we learn, the Jewish religion tells us, that she received this news. And when she heard this news, she died immediately. This was our first mother. And to me, the lesson is clear. No mother can tolerate that her child is killed, sacrificed in any way.
دور المرأة هون هو دور الأصعب من دور الرجل، لأن المرأة هي اللي بتحمل الطفل تاعها، وهي اللي بتربي، ولما بنقتل ابنها، وأغلى إشي بالدنيا علينا هم أولادنا. فإذا اليوم الامرأة وعيت للحركة السياسية ودخلت في عملية سياسية وقررت تعطي دعمها للرجل بعملية السلام، الرجل رح ينظر للقضية بشكل آخر.
We give birth to children, we raise our children to live, to thrive, to prosper, not to die, not to be killed, either as a victim of a bomber or as a soldier or as a terrorist or anything else.
دور إلانا إننا ندور على الطريق وندور على الناس، نحكي لهم إنه ويلات الحرب بس بتسبب دمار، بتسبب دمار الأرض ممكن تنبنى، بس دمار فقدان الابن وفقدان الولد.
أشياء حلوة هنا المركز.
جوزي الله يرضى عليه اشترى قطعة الأرض منه وبنى هذا المركز على حسابه الشخصي، بدعموا نسائهم وبدعموا بيتهم وبحب بيتهم، وبنى عليها مركز اسمه مركز هاجر وسارة. هذا المركز اللي أنا بتدخليه ببلدي عنوان لإلي بعد ما أنا أطلع من الحياة أكمل أولادي الطريق.
Trust Emun was started a couple years ago by myself and a group of people who wanted to really do something that we felt could have an impact on the situation. And we started a group that is women-led and works very much in terms of empowering women and the way women work, because we see this as really the key to shifting the energies here. Our emphasis is to do things in a way that women work. Sitting in a circle, making sure that everyone has a chance to speak, making decisions in a consensus manner, not working in a hierarchical form. We live in a world in the Middle East where the governments are run by men, the religions are run by men, the economy is run by men. Basically, if everything were going well, we'd say terrific. But since everything is in such a horrific mess, and we live in such a madness of violence, we decided that we have to strengthen and emphasize what is missing, and what is missing is the voice of women.
أنا بنت النكبة، أنا بنت كانت جدتي عايشة بالطنطورة، وكان في هناك نكبة وانقتل سيدي، وبرضه سيدي أبوي انقتل بأم الفحم. فأنا تركت جدتي أم الفحم وجاءت لتعيش في الفرديس طلبا للرزق. طبعا كانوا ملاك أرض، بس ولا حد لحد اليوم عرف كيف انقتل سيدي. يعني كل اللي صار إنه انقتل وجابوه لحد أول من الفحم وتركوه، وكل ذنبه إنه قاعد بحكي برضه. أنا إلي أخرى قصة ثانية عن جدتي، إنه ب 48 كانت عايشة بالطنطورة، كانت متزرة بالطنطورة وانقتل أخوها قدام عينها، ما عندهاش إلا أخو واحد. بنتها بس بعد 67 عرفت إنها هي بالأردن، تركت بنتها وجوزها وابنها، بس بعد 67 عرفنا إنها هي بالأردن اللي هي خالتي طبعا.
My son was in a bombing on Ben Yehuda Street over 11 years ago. Terrorist suicide bombing where 7 people were killed. Right next to him was a little girl who got 1 piece of shrapnel to her heart and was killed instantly. He got 100 pieces of shrapnel and everything else, and he's walking around with a beautiful life now. Here's a picture of my son with his daughter. She's actually one of a pair of twins. She has a brother too. But the two of them are sitting here on a monument on Ben Yehuda Street that was put up to commemorate when my son was in a bombing. I just hate to be talking about this so conversational when really it should be talked about in terms of the real horror that's involved when somebody is so severely injured by terrorists who really are out to kill you. And thank God he survived, and thank God I'm doing the work I am now. But we can never forget that people were killed that same day, and people are being killed here every day. And I, as an Israeli, do this work from that point of view with total compassion for the fact that Palestinians are being killed every day. And I'm also concerned that that should end. When my son got married, I invited all of my friends, including Ibtisam and other Muslims and Christians and Druze that I work with. And when Ibtisam and I were dancing together with all the women, and all the Arab women came to dance with me, I felt a certain healing that here Arab people had tried to kill my son, and now they're here dancing at his wedding and sharing my joy, and that we've all transcended all of the madness of our conflict, and we're able to just share in each other's joy together. Well, it's really a wonderful story because it's the microcosm of the whole conflict. Ibtisam and I were each invited to go to an interfaith conference in Berlin. We didn't know each other. We showed up there and we agreed to be in a room together.
بالبداية أنا كنت أعرف أخوات يهوديات بس ما كنتش أعرف امرأة متدينة. ولما قالوا لي إنه في مؤتمر ببرلين وهالمرة لقاء أديان، فكتير انبسطت إني راح أتعرف على امرأة يهودية متدينة. فبس وصلت برلين يعني كنت جاهزة بدي أتعرف على المرأة، لأنه بدي أعرف الجانب الآخر من الديانة اليهودية، وأبدأ أتعلم عن الديانة نفسها عن طريق نفس الأخت اللي أتعرف عليها.
And in the evening, it was time to go to bed, and we're talking about our husbands and our mothers and our children and all of the things that women like to talk about. And we're sitting there, we're lying there nose to nose and talking, and finally we said we better go to sleep. So we're quiet for a while, and then Ibtisam said, you know, if my family back in Furadis and Al-Fahum, if they knew I'm going to sleep with some strange Jewish woman, they would say to me, be afraid, she could wake up in the night and knife you. And I got so upset. I said, Ibtisam, you Arabs are the ones that knife us. I'm the one that should be afraid. And then we both burst out laughing because we realized we had immediately gotten down to the bottom line. Because what is everyone is afraid of? Everyone is afraid the other one's going to kill them. That's the basic fear. It's a primal fear. I'm going to get killed by this person. And we, lying there in bed in the middle of the night, got there. And we just laughed and laughed, and we said, you know, when we get back to Israel, we have to work together, and we have to bring women together to see that we're all just mothers and daughters and wives and friends. We're really fostering building trust. We want to build mutual trust and understanding among people. When people say to me, all the Arabs hate us, they all want to kill us. And I just say to them, well, I don't know. Ibtisam just came and stayed at my house. She doesn't hate me. She doesn't want to kill me. I can't go along with this attitude that all Arabs this, all Palestinians that, because I have a different experience.
Ismha Ibtisam Mahameed. Ibtisam. Ibtisam is the founder of a women's peace center in Paradis called the Tent of Sarah and Hagar.
بسنة ال 98 أنا فكرت إنه لازم أعمل ثورة لحتى تخرج المرأة من المطبخ وتبدأ تشوف نفسها كامرأة قيادية. كان هدفي أخرج النساء من البيت للتعليم للشغل، وكان لازم بدي خطوة جريئة على أساس إنه أطلع النساء إلى حق السياسي. كان لازم أنا أخذ هاي الخطوة وأنا أبادر فيها وأرشح نفسي للانتخابات. ما كان هواين على رجال البلد، كان كثير انتقاد على طريقي، لأنه قالوا أن هاي الحرية يمكن تؤدي لسلبيات لنساء القرية، ولدرجة إنه يعني تقريبا صار نوع من انقلاب ضدي، لدرجة إن الشيخ بالجامع رفض حتى الفكرة نفسها اللي أنا جايها بالقرية وجايها كامرأة مسلمة وكامرأة متحجبة. بس أنا بعرف إن الإسلام بيعطيني الحق أمارس حياتي الطبيعية، لأن بالقرآن مكتوب بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قد خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى. القرآن ما ميز إنه أكثر الرجل أو أكثر المرأة، أعطانا الحق بالتساوي. هلا إيش عملت بالشيخ؟ دعيت 500 امرأة وحطيت فيديو وحكيت له اعمل محاضرة عن رفع مكانة المرأة بالإسلام، فكثير عظمها وكثير وصلها إنه كانت على زمان الرسول مراقبة الدولة. بعد ما خلص اللقاء فتت على القاعة عنده قلت له هذا هو حديثك اللي حكيت هلأ للنساء، فليه بتمنعني أنا أخذ حقي عن طريق كلامك؟ وهيك أنا قدرت أسكر عليه الطريق وأخذ بركته.
The highest expression of one's own spiritual tradition is to welcome and accept everyone of whatever faith, background, opinion as yourself, because the golden rule is the highest teaching that we have. So I'm trying to help young people to start living the golden rule the way Ibtisam and I have learned to do, just by getting to know each other. We have a wonderful program called Let's Make Up that has Israeli and Palestinian women coming together for coffee and cake in a beautiful cafe right outside Jaffa Gate of the old city. And there they get a cosmetics demonstration by a big company like L'Oreal, and they do makeovers for everyone, and it's very feminine and fun, and everyone has a good time. And people say to me, Elana, what kind of activity is this? Makeup, ladies, what difference does this make? But from these meetings, we have had a teen talk program begin, which involves Palestinian youth and Israeli youth, young women, who are studying and meeting together. And that came because the two leaders both came by chance to the Let's Make Up session. Also, some women showed up with babies and started talking about doing a mommy and me class with babies together. And this is the essence of what trust is doing, trying to build normal human relationships based on trust and getting rid of all the mistrust, suspicion, getting rid of the vengeance that is in everyone's heart here, getting rid of all the blame and victimization, and just seeing a human being that you can relate with.
أولاً يعني حتى قبل 10 سنوات ما كان المجال للمرأة إنها تخرج للتعليم، لأنه ما كان عندنا مدرسة ثانوية، فكان الأب لازم يضطر يعلم ابنته في تعليم بحيفا عن أي المدينة، وكان هناك فروق شاسعة بين القرية وبين المدينة من ناحية عادات وتقاليد. فكانت عدة فتيات فقط، يعني أنا كنت واحدة من الفتيات مع أخرى صديقة اسمها أميرة. اتعلمنا بحيفا من 60 امرأة كان لازم هن يتعلمن وما قدروا يتعلمن، إنه ما سمحوا الأهالي لهالفتيات يطلعوا. ومن هون كانت بدنا نهضة تعليمية بحق المرأة، اللي يصير معلمة، يصير محامية، يصير دكتورة، يصير قاضية، ويصير سكرتيرة، وتصير تصير الأشياء المفروض فيها المعلمة. الإشي الثاني ما كانش موجود هو المجال السياسي. كان يمنع إن المرأة تتحدث عن سياسة القرية أمام الرجال، إن كانها تخص رجال فقط. وهون أجى دوري إن أقول أنا بنت البلد، بهمني بلدي، بحب بلدي، بدي أكون موجودة معكم في مطبخ السياسي حتى أشارككم الشغل وأقدم البلد بشكل أفضل. إذا بدي أقدم البلد بدي أقدم أول شيء اسمه نهضة المرأة. من غير نهضة البلد فيش مستقبل لأولادنا.
And you should know Ibtisam recently helped form a women's council in Faradis, and for the first time they got their candidate elected mayor. He was a man, but he was with their support.
يونس محمد حسن مرعي سكان قرية الفرديس، انتخبت لرئاسة مجلس بال2008. قعدت مع ابتسام بعد ما ربحت رئاسة المجلس، قلت لها الوعود اللي وعدتك بيهن أنا ملزم بيهن.
السلام عليكم أبو كمال.
عليكم السلام.
كيف حالك؟
أهلا وسهلا. كيف الحال؟
الله يرضى عليك. الحمد لله.
أهلا وسهلا. تفضلي.
وفي عنا إحنا دورات بدأت يوم الأحد، دورة العبراني، دورة العربي، دورة الإنجليزي، ودورة الحاسوب. وبعد بنستنى على قسم الشؤون يفتحونا المطبخ على أساس بعد في 3 دورات. نعم. رسم على الكزاز والطبيخ والفن الكايك اللي احنا بنستنى طبعا المرحلة الثانية إن شاء الله إنه نبدأ بيها. اليوم الرابع بالتعليم.
بالأسبوع كم يوم بالأسبوع بتعلمين؟
5 أيام.
3 أيام.
5
أيام.
من الأحد للخميس.
من أي ساعة لأي ساعة؟
نبدأ من الساعة 3 للساعة 5، وفي قسم معلومات ببدأ من 4 ل6. كل واحد حسب كيف تبدأ الشغل حسب النساء. يعني في نساء بيكون بدن بعد ساعة العصر، في نساء بيكون بدن شوي لحد ما يجي أولادين وحد أولادين من الناحية التعليمية ويطلعوا الساعة 4. في نساء بيقول لا أنا أولادي كبروا ومعتمدين على نفسهم، بدي أبدأ لأن جوزي بيروح من الشغل على 5. فإحنا رتبنا حالنا هو إمكانيات المرأة والساعات تطلع منها.
كم بنت موجودات؟ حلو.
قبل بكان احنا موجودين بالمركز الشيخوخة، لأنه كان بس غرفة واحدة، ما كنا نقدر نعمل عدة فعاليات، كنا نقدر ناخذ بس حلقة واحدة. اليوم لأننا مدرسة فبإمكاننا نستوعب نفس اليوم أكثر من معلم تعلم، وصار عندنا أكثر طلب إنه النساء يتعلم. بس كل معلمة بتقدر تاخذ بس 15 امرأة وتعلم نفس اليوم، بس احنا عندنا حوالي 200 امرأة بيستنوا.
Look at this book. We were working on it for a year. It's called 60 Years, 60 Voices, Israeli and Palestinian Women. I arranged for the 30 Israeli women, and my Palestinian counterpart brought the 30 Palestinian women. Look, here's Ibtisam, just like that. Each woman's page has her picture, a bio. It has an interview, excerpts from her interview in Hebrew, Arabic, and English. For me, what's most important is we're using the women in this book as a core group of women that are starting to get together now because they came together just in the book. And they are very interested to get to meet each other and get to know each other. And so we're starting to plan some joint activities. I don't know if you saw also, Yudit is going to have a reunion for all the women of the book. And that's January 20th, I think it is. Now that, hopefully, you can put out in Arabic so that we'll be able to have the Arab women also able to read the invitation in Arabic and see how many are interested to come, and we'll get permits for anyone that wants to come.
وكان هدفي بهاي الدورة إني أنشئ مجموعة نسائية اللي تقدر تساعدني بمهمتي إن قديش أقدر أجيب نساء على الدورات، قديش أقدر أطلع المرأة من البيت.
كنت بجنين، كنا ساكنين بجنين إحنا. بفترة الاجتياح استشهدوا عمام لإلي 3، البيت انهدم، أبوي تصاوب. اضطرينا نطلع هون. اضطرينا نطلع هون لأجل علاج لأبوي. عفواً. اضطرينا نطلع هون عشان علاج أبوي. كان صعب علي يمشي عشان الطريق صعب علي يوصل من هون لجنين. اضطرينا نسكن هون بالفراديس. لما سكنت بالفراديس أول 3 أشهر خطبت، اتجوزت بالفراديس. وقعدت تقريبا سنة بالبيت، لا بروح ولا باجي. فترة ما تعرفت على ابتسام وفتحت دوراتها وصرت أتعلم بالدورات اللي فتحتها. استفدت من الدورة كل إشي منيح، استفدت منها إنه التقوية الشخصية، استفدت منها الاعتماد على نفسي، حب الناس، مخالطة الناس، حبي للعمل باجتهاد وبقوة، وما أخاف من أي شيء بيواجهني. أواجه كل إشي بيواجهني، أمشي معه كيف هو. تعلمت عبراني، كنت أنا بعرفش ولا إشي بالعبراني، اليوم بعرف أقرأ، بعرف أكتب عبراني كتير مليح. بتعلم إسا إنجليزي، بتعلم حاسوب، وبنكمل بدورة القيادة إن شاء الله. لحد ما اجت ابتسام فتحت هذه الدورات، غيرت كتير في الروتين عند النسوان. صارت المرأة اللي كانت ما تعرفش يعني ما تقدرش تحكي مع البني آدم اللي بيصرخ عليها، تقدر توقف له، تقدر. صارت قوية الشخصية، صارت تقدر تروح تيجي لحالها، ما حدش يسألها، قدرت توقف ببيتها أزيد من ما كانت هي بس للطبخ والمسح، قدرت توقف ببيتها.
These kinds of relationships not just break stereotypes, but they form the basis for a wonderful new relationship to get started. This is what building trust is all about. It's getting people into each other's homes. It's having, always in our meetings, we have paired exercises where people get to talk and share one-on-one with someone who they would never meet, let alone talk to, let alone be able to share something about perhaps when I've asked them to tell about someone they trust. So here's a Palestinian telling an Israeli about someone that they trust, and the Israeli doing the same thing, where we take Israelis to Beit Hanina and to East Jerusalem to go into the homes of Palestinians where they would never go to this neighborhood, they would never go inside an Arab home, and all of a sudden there they are, feeling relaxed, getting to meet Palestinian neighbors that are living right there. The same thing on the Palestinian side. We bring Palestinians to my home, to other people's homes in West Jerusalem. They've never been in an Israeli home before. We decided to combine the parties because so many people wanted to get to Eliyahu's and to come here. So we're going to prepare our latkes, and the women who will come, we will light candles with them, and then we'll all go to Eliyahu's and join the party there. איזה ריח טוב, רוצים עוד? Nomi? That was enough? Did you have good oily feeling in here? It's the holidays all about oil. We have to have lots of oil.
We got enough.
On a spiritual level, and what's very important to me is that the lighting of candles, and this is such a little tiny candle, makes just a little bit of light. But yet that little bit of light in that candle is able to illumine a great darkness. Because we all know if you're in a totally dark room and you light just one candle, all of a sudden you can see what's going on. So we have this beautiful opportunity now with our little candles to start a little bit of light that grows and grows and grows.
At Christmas, you must not only think about, Santa Claus and the tree and the decoration. You must think about the people that need help.
And it has to have it in it peace, happiness, salvation, and solutions too.
I love all the holidays, Hanukkah, I love Christmas and Eid al-Adha, because this is holidays. I learn about Christmas and about the Jews and about the Islam.
But it's really, peacemaking is it's just this. This is the redemption right here. This is
Amen.
Yeah.
When we're all together, to me, this is redemption. What more is there? And we all have a party together.
Bruchim habaim, ahlan wa sahlan el beiti. Welcome. Happy Hanukkah.
My wish is for all of us, soon, in our days, and quickly, be an example to the world of how Muslims and Jews, Christians can all live together in the Holy Land and have it truly be a holy land.
بدي كان السلام وأنا طفلة بدي أعطي السلام لأولادي ولأولاد أولادي ولأحفادي من بعدي. زرع السلام زي الشجرة، أنت بتبنيها بدك 20 سنة لحد ما تقطفها وبتخليها لأولادك من بعدها.
Most people watch television, they think Arabs and Jews will never live together in peace and harmony. But we want to change that opinion. We want them to know that there is people willing to live together in peace and harmony and work together as a family, as the children of Abraham.
Shalom salam hu, 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 to the middle. Shalom salam hu, shalom salam hu.
All the three religions, they talk about peace and love and harmony and living together in peace. 3% is violence. But unfortunately, we are holding to the 3% and we're forgetting the rest. God says in His holy book, killing one person like killing the whole world, saving one person like you're saving the whole world. That teach us that God wants people to live together in peace and harmony. God doesn't want people to kill in His name and on His behalf.
Because this is really the unsolvable riddle of the planet Earth, is Israel-Palestine conflict. So how can we get to the deeper level of unity and connection and understanding between the people on both sides, in both communities?
This is Eliyahu, McLean. And Eliyahu has also taught me about love and anger and how to deal with all of my disappointments, because Eliyahu connects every conceivable person in this country, in both Israel and Palestine, and really all over the world. I've never seen a person capable of bridging more peoples than Eliyahu.
I would say I first got into peacemaking from the moment that I was born, because in my own family background, in a certain way, I'm a bridge between worlds. My father's side of the family were Christian, and I actually come from a long line of Protestant pastors and missionaries. My mother is Jewish, and I feel like that in my very nature and makeup, I'm a bridge between different worlds. I first came to the Holy Land at age 15 after I had had a bar mitzvah in Honolulu, Hawaii. I developed a connection with my identity and I came out to the Holy Land, to Israel, fell in love with the country. I was 18 years old and I started to become an activist for Israel, a pro-Israel activist in the Berkeley campus. So my training was not here, but it was actually on the streets of Berkeley. And when I first came to Berkeley, there was an initiative to make Berkeley a sister city with Jabalia refugee camp in Gaza. And so I started to, though I was opposed to the initiative at the time, I started to meet the Yes on Jabalia activists, and for the first time started to learn about the narrative of the other side of the story, the Palestinian people.
My name is Sheikh Abdul Aziz al-Bukhari from Jerusalem, the old city. I live right on the Via Dolorosa, and my background it's on the Al-Aqsa Mosque and Al-Haram al-Sharif. I grew up in the same house where we're living for the last 400 years. We've been living in the same house since 1616.
Sheikh Bukhari is a direct descendant of the most famous scholar of Islam called Imam Bukhari. In Uzbekistan, he's very well known as representing the Imam, the legacy of the family of Imam Bukhari, the most famous scholar of the Hadith in Islam. The Islamic opposition movement invited him to be their presidential candidate. He turned down the offer.
Imam al-Bukhari, he is the first Muslims who collected the commentary of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he put it in one book called Sahih al-Bukhari. And this book become like the law, the Tanakh in the Jewish tradition. So everything the Prophet says, it's in that book. And in Uzbekistan, or in all the Muslim worlds, they look at Imam Bukhari as like one of the major teacher in Islamic religion. These are written by the family members of the Imam al-Bukhari.
And then look at this one with all of the different
this is
around.
The subject, and he wrote commentary about it on the side.
Okay.
So it's the subject is about the Sufi, and the commentary what other people say about the Sufi, like the Naqshbandi say this, the Qadiri say this, the Alawi say this, the Shadili say this. So every commentary about the subject is around it.
And this is the Talmud in Judaism started the same way, with a central text, and then they wrote all the commentaries around because the Talmud was in Iraq.
But the purpose that my family came from Bukhara for is to establish the center to teach Sufism. So when they came, they have to bring the book with them. How can you teach if you have nothing to teach with?
I was at Hebrew University in Jerusalem, and I met a young student at Bethlehem University from Dheisheh refugee camp, and I became friends with him. So I started to then bring students from California to Bethlehem and Bethlehem University and the refugee camp, and that was the beginning of like my bridge building work. I was out of money, and this was the year of the Gulf War, so our whole program was canceled. So I got a job living and working at the Jerusalem City Hall on Jaffa Road in Jerusalem as a construction worker. So I was living on the site of the construction site with Palestinian construction workers from Hebron, including sheikhs from Hebron who were there as construction workers, and I was this young American Jewish guy who was in the field, and that was how I learned how to speak spoken Arabic, and I connected with the construction workers. So I had a friend, Palestinian friend from the construction site when I was living at the Jerusalem City Hall. This is now 1990-91, and a Jewish friend that I had been studying with years before who had become a Baal Tshuva, had returned to Judaism, now wearing black hat, black coat, and they both said hello to me at the same moment. And in Arabic and in Hebrew, Ken, Aywa, I said to them, yes. And they looked at each other almost in horror. How does he know that guy? And that was a realization at that moment that I was walking in different worlds, and maybe part of my purpose here is to build a bridge and to connect heart to heart with the grassroots Palestinian community, the religious Jewish community, Israeli mainstream, to try to bring people together. So I took the money that I made from this construction job in Jerusalem and I went to Egypt. And I ended up spending several months in Egypt, with a good part of that time in Cairo. It was in Cairo that I met a West African Sufi who became my chevruta, my spiritual study partner. And through that process, I went deep into study of Islam and Sufism in Egypt. And so when I came back to Israel 2 months later, I felt like I had a much deeper connection with Islam and Arabic and Islamic spirituality. So from that moment forward, I could relate to religious Muslims and sheikhs and people of faith from the Islamic community. I went into a period, you have to understand, of prayer in the Islamic tradition, learning from the inside about their realm. And till this day, when I speak to any simple Palestinian to the most high-level sheikh, they automatically feel a bond with me. وين انت؟ يلا تفضلوا. Welcome. All right. I was searching for a Sufi, Muslim mystic that I could build a partnership and a friendship with. And I was at a conference of the Elijah Interfaith School in Jerusalem, and I saw this humble Sufi sheikh sitting on a panel, and his name was Sheikh Abdul Aziz Bukhari. This was in the year 1999, and I went up and introduced myself to him. But the bond between us didn't really begin till we were invited by the UNESCO, the United Nations UNESCO program, to a conference in Uzbekistan, in Tashkent and in Bukhara. And the conference was about the role of Sufism in inter-religious dialogue and peacemaking, something like that. So we started to hang out when we were in Uzbekistan together.
After we finished our conference in Uzbekistan, and especially in Bukhara, we went to the tomb of Imam Bukhari, and we did prayer over there.
It felt like Imam Bukhari himself gave us his blessing. There was a feeling of light and harmony and connection that swept over us when we led that prayer. And from that moment forward, we've been working together.
The Imam Bukhari blessed us, and he binded us. I know many rabbis, I work with many rabbis, I have a good relationship with many rabbis, but I end up working with Eliyahu more than anybody else, and I think because of the blessing of the Imam Bukhari. From that day we start working together, and we form Jerusalem Peacemakers, and we work to bring the children of Abraham together for learning about the others.
Part of what we are in Jerusalem Peacemakers are spiritual peacemakers. אנחנו רצינו גם לעשות תפילה מעבד ביחד ביתنا בقول صلي السلام إن شاء الله מעבד.
We believe in to empower people. For some family, when there are large number of family, when they have like 10, 15 people in the family, we buy them 3 goats, and they milk the 3 goats and they sell the milk. But the second year, the 3 goats become 6 goats, and the following year the 6 will become 12. Then we take 3, we give it to another family, and we roll like this.
The first event that we organized was at the place called Nebi Musa, the tomb of the prophet Moses near Jericho, at an Islamic holy place in the desert with over 150 people, West Bank Palestinians from Jericho and Ramallah, Israeli religious Jews, secular, and we had a prayer circle. He and I led this circle and organized it and got all those people together. We saw that there was some kind of spirit of cooperation, that it was almost from a higher place, that was beyond what Eliyahu could do on his own and beyond what Sheikh Bukhari could do on his own.
And what makes us so different, because if I go as a Muslim and I say blah blah blah, I want a peace, I want this, I want this, they said, of course, every Arab will say that. And if Eliyahu went by himself and he said, I'm a Jew, we want peace and we want that, of course they're going to say, everybody's going to say the same. But when they see us together, that's the proof. That's the reality. That's the real things that they see Arabs and Jews together talking about the same message. with the same feeling. That's we all seeking for peace. And that's what makes us so strong. And that's what makes us so effective.
When I'm able to bring right-wing skeptics and friends who have never met an Arab or Muslim or Palestinian and bring the Sheikh to my house for Shabbat dinner, or to bring them into his center in the old city, Sheikh Bukhari in a certain way is a portal way for many Israeli people who have never met a Muslim and a religious Muslim. He is a portal way to experience the Muslim, the Arab, the Palestinian. And he's so sweet and he's so likable that something shifts in them and their heart can open, and they see by the love and friendship that we have between us an example on a small scale of the peace that we're talking about and trying to manifest on a large scale.
If he starts saying salam, shalom, nobody will, what he's talking about. But when they see me and him say salam, shalom, it's the same meaning and coming from both hearts.
I have a deep friendship and a solidity within the Jewish community and show that I'm proud to be Jewish. I'm not giving up my Jewish heritage or trying to cut off my roots, but that I'm proud that I was able to move to Israel and make Aliyah. So I have all the cards to have legitimacy within my Jewish community. So then I can then bring in my more right-wing and skeptical community and chevre and circle of friends to a space to be able to meet the Palestinians that I'm building trust with on another side. For me, these are all dualities, and we're trying to get to the deeper lying wisdom, which is the Middle Eastern peace wisdom, the wisdom that emerges from this land and from the people of this land, of how to connect and to unify them beyond the political opposites.
Although we live in the same country, neighbors next to each other, but we don't have that relationship. We don't talk to each other. So we bring Arabs and Jews in meetings and we let them talk to each other, get to know each other, building that trust that we all are equal in this world. And you can't judge somebody by his religion or by his title. You have to judge him for his own personality. If the person is good, that doesn't mean because he is none from your religion that he is a bad person.
A lot of times, a lot of people on all different sides throw things at people based on, for sometimes it's the international human rights language. And that won't reach the settlers or the religious Jews or the simple shopkeepers and falafel vendors in Jerusalem. Or if I speak to a Palestinian, showing my understanding of the Quran and quoting verses of the Quran and quoting their concepts and stuff, that makes a big difference in being able to help build a bridge on another side. So then when I create an event and a space to bring the two together, I'm constantly keeping an eye on whoever is in the room and whoever is there, and I'm always making sure that person's view is somehow represented in the space and the circle. Welcome everybody, Bruchim Habaim, Ahlan wa Sahlan Il Beiti. Welcome. It is not every day that we have this unique gathering of religious Jews and Christians and Muslims and Israelis and Palestinians celebrating and honoring each other's holy days, breaking down the walls of fear towards building a shared future for all of us, children of Abraham. And we have a very special gathering with some very special people here. We have a lot of special teachers and friends from many parts of the world.
My Christmas message that God wants to take our hearts of stone, to take your mind, heart of stone, and to change it to heart of flesh, to heart that loves.
This is not about good versus evil. This is about the arithmetic of building the hearts together.
What is more important, a man, a soul, or a stone? So a soul is much more important than a stone. So why are we fighting over stones and killing souls in order to keep stones?
One of the activity we did, it was called the Big Hug. for the lover of
Lovers
Jerusalem.
of Jerusalem. And we've had different people from different faiths gather to pray together for the peace of Jerusalem at Jaffa Gate, at Zion Gate, at Damascus Gate. Sheikh Bukhari and I led together, we led hands, and we had everyone form a long line, a chain of hundreds of people to literally hug. We started with maybe 20 people, and before we knew it, hundreds and hundreds of people, religious Jews, settlers, simple Palestinian shopkeepers.
Even people passing by, they saw the gathering, they stood up. And if you look at the film, you will see a soldier lady. She started dancing with us. That was so amazing because, you know, a soldier is supposed to be in uniform, not doing these kind of activities. But she couldn't help herself. She loved Jerusalem, and she had to share that feeling with us.
Can I add also at the big hug of Jerusalem that took place on June 24th, 2008, all of us were holding hands together, leading about 800 Israelis and Palestinians in prayer for the peace of Jerusalem. And Rabbi Froman started to shout at the top of his lungs in Arabic, Allahu Akbar.
I'm used many times also in this opportunity of the big hug of Jerusalem, but in many other opportunities that we say together in Arabic, Allahu Akbar, and then we say, Hashalom Yinatzach, may peace prevail.
Violence will never solve the problem. Violence will never end the situation. If they think violence will solve this problem, we've been fighting for the last 60 years. Show me where violence can achieve peace. Only dialogue, only understanding, only respect, only seeing the other with your own eyes as a human being. That will achieve peace. That will solve the problem.
From my experience, building deep and lasting friendships, it helps to rebuild trust between our people, between the Israelis and the Palestinians. I hear a lot of people in the mainstream saying, we don't have to have love with the Palestinians. We just have to come to a pragmatic agreement, separate the two sides, give them what they want, we'll take what we want. But I believe that that is not enough, that also we really do have to have a deep love and a connection and a friendship.
I like to give a message to the world. I think every religious leader and every supporter for peace and every person in this world is an obligation and demand on his shoulder to work for peace. Don't wait just for us to establish peace. Everybody should work for peace. Everybody should aim to help the peace process.
Shalom salam hu, shalom salam hu, shalom salam hu, shalom salam hu.
The fact that Marc met in Palestine with Sufi sheikhs and went into Palestine when no American rabbi was doing that from a spiritual place, for me was a big, big sign that Marc is the real thing.
I don't always push what my identity is in terms of being Jewish or of even being a rabbi. Mostly I'm a professor of conflict resolution.
I've been in many wars in Middle East. In 1967, I vaguely remember, but 1973 I remember very much. And I remember the Lebanese war when I was doing my school in Beirut. So you know what? I don't want any more war. My dream, and I'm inspired by all those young generation to wake up in the morning and know that we're going to have a better day, a better tomorrow, with a Middle East free of war, of violence, more trade, better economy, so we can have more jobs for those young generations. And without doing this work and without building bridges between all of us, we can't have a dream.
I grew up only feeling safe with Orthodox Jews. I didn't even have non-Orthodox Jewish friends. I was taught every one of the instincts of my community was telling me that Arabs were dangerous. Come my early 20s, and I start to sense that something's going badly. All the wars here and the occupation was having a corrosive effect on Jewish spirituality. And the height of it came in 1982 with the Lebanon War, and I was about 25, 23, and the massacre in Sabra and Shatila in Beirut. That was hundreds and hundreds of Palestinian civilians, families that were murdered. And this was a turning point for me, and I started to question a lot of things. That's when I started coming here on a fairly regular basis and starting to have a determination to reach out beyond the Jewish people. And with every step that I took out of this very, very closed environment that I had grown up with, my spiritual sensibility, my emotions, everything was changing. And I found myself in between peoples.
For me, I'm a very, very patriotic Syrian. In Syria, geographically, we are in the middle of the world. We have so many peoples coming across, and we, in a way, we learn. And we've been neighbors with Jewish all our life. So in our agenda also to have the culture of debate between us, between Syrian and between the other worlds and among all of us.
I remember one time going to a place called Neve Shalom, which was or even just beginning in 1982, in the early 80s. And it was a place in Israel where Jews and Arabs were living together. And that's unheard of here, that it was an intentional community of Jews and Arabs. And I went up, I just took a cab. This was all new to me. I had only had a Jewish narrative my whole life. I had every year, religiously, in the Passover season, saw the film with Paul Newman, Exodus, and that was my narrative of Israel. I'd never read anything about the Arab or Palestinian narrative. Suddenly, this was a new narrative. And an Arab man took me into his home. I came unannounced, and he took me into his home and brought 10 of his young friends to sit with me in a room. It was the first time in my life that I had sat with Arab men. I was terrified. And so before I know it, I'm in this small room in a very poor house with 10 Arab men. And I was shaking like a leaf because my whole life I'd been surrounded by religious Jews. And suddenly I'm with 10 Arab men. And I knew inside my heart what was going on in me, and I decided just to be honest about it. I said, you know, I'm scared, to the group. And they started laughing. They said to me, why are you afraid of us? You're the ones with the guns. That was my earliest Arab-Jewish dialogue. I was very young, I was very halting, but it was my first experiments with that process of listening and communication. And it was quite beautiful.
I did my conflict resolution degree from University of Toronto first, and I did like this conflict resolution. I like that people, they don't kill each other to get to a solution, to talk together and to have, we're a human being, have the brain. We're not animals to go kill each other. So this is how it gets me to like it. But later when I went to Fletcher, and I know about all these human rights things, and this is how I know that I'm passionate about it, but I really didn't know where to start.
I was walking on the ridge with the first Arab man that I had ever met as a friend, and he was looking at every single herb he knew. And I said, my God, they know this land. They understand this land. That's what loving a land is all about.
And then I asked him a question. I said that's a lovely group of pine trees over there. And he just didn't say anything. And so I said, well, why are you uncomfortable with the pine trees? He said, I'll take you for a walk there. I'll show you a well. I said, what do you mean a well? He says, the well from a village. I said, what do you mean a village? He said, there was a village there. So I said, it's a group of pine trees. I don't see a village. He said, yeah, there was a village there. They put the pine trees to cover up the village. Why did they put the pine trees there? Because they drove the people out in 1948 and they wanted to cover up the evidence. He said, all along here, all throughout this region, you'll see pine trees and they're covering up villages that used to be there. And that was tough. I remember as a child that in first grade, the biggest source of pride was that I got to give a little bit of money to plant a tree in Israel from the Jewish National Fund. And I had that on my wall year after year, that I had planted a tree in Israel. And at 25, I discover that I planted that tree on top of a village. On top of a village where people used to live. And suddenly, I was part of the conquest. And I felt violated.
Yes, we need peaceful coexistence with Israel based on justice, together with other reforms mentioned. This can lead all the Arab countries, include Israel, together to be a model for the coexistence of the world. How many extremist and Muslim groups get so much popular in the Arab streets because of how much they give to the social work, how much they build hospital and school? Why don't we do the same? Why don't we start working there on the grassroots with the poor people? Because these poor people, they think they want dream. They want to keep their dream going. They want to have for their children a better tomorrow.
Then there's resolution issues. Now,
But don't forget, we need it for next time. Because now this is the class, but we need it. We need all of it. The first time I met Marc, we were in the Dead Sea in Jordan, in the World Economic Forum. And we were together in the same sessions. And this is how we start speaking.
As the session began, for asking for questions, Hind shot up her hand like this, like in school, saying, she had a question, and her question was all about human rights, and she announced that I'm from Syria, and I want human rights to be observed all over the world by all regimes. And I was stunned by her courage and by her outspokenness. And I said, I need to meet this person. I happened to send her an email saying that I was going to be in the region doing work. And then out of the blue, she sends me back an email, why don't you come and speak in Syria? And I was completely shocked by that invitation. And that's how the whole exchange began.
I know how much he promotes the non-violent change and about how much we can build bridges instead of wars between people, and how much we're both of us passionate about peace, about saving the world from more problems and dramas. So I thought when he sent me this email, I was so excited because I want my people, the Syrian beautiful people who I belong to them, to know and to share his comments and his principle in life, and to learn from him and to teach him also about us.
I had never met anybody from Syria. It had been a forbidden territory. And so Hind was the first one. And when I saw the website, and it was all about democracy and social justice, and also a very fun and exciting approach to the world and how beautiful Syria is, it was very patriotic. So it was patriotic Syrian and at the same time about values. I was stunned. And I said, this is interesting.
So I called some friends and we decided, yes, somebody like him with his great books and great knowledge and great values, we need him to be part of us. So that's why I invited him to come.
But from the very second I got over there, I was treated like an honored guest and officially met at the border.
We crossed the border at midnight, and it was
one of those powerful moments because I knew that they were bringing a Chacham to Syria for the first time.
And we decided to be in a library. And this is our national library. So it's a good symbol of accepting the others in our society.
I think it's important for me to say that I am not here as a representative of the United States or the State of Israel. I'm here as somebody who's worked with people in conflict all over the world, and I've tried my best in various situations that appear to be hopeless and that turn out not to be when you look more carefully at where hope began and how it turned into something much better.
So we have an amazing group, and we're like such a patriotic group, and with the help of the ministers of the information, Dr. Mehdi Dakhlallah, and his assistants, Dr. Nizar Mayhoub. And I told them about my idea. They say, why not? Let's do it together. So with the help of the Minister of Information, Minister of the Syrian Public Syrian Public Relations Associations, with my other intellect friends who are really supporting building bridges with the world.
I'll never forget, I describe in the book the scene of racing through the streets of Damascus with her driver Abu Ali driving at insane speeds, and Hind, on her cell phone, talking to everyone to dodge every detour, every pothole before we were going to do the public events that changed everything. And everything, there were roadblocks. So she's going through political roadblocks in her cell phone. He's going through all the roadblocks on the street. And I'm jet lagged, wondering, how did I get myself into this? I don't even understand Arabic.
We try to engage as much people as we can. So in the last time when he was there, we engage other civil societies. We engage with us, the Mufti, the Shiite groups, with the Ma'raj, the magazine, the editors. We have partners now, real partners from the other civil society in Damascus. We even engage government with us. There is member of parliament sitting with us and discussing the conflict resolution and learning together.
I had a long history of working on interfaith relations, and of all places in the Middle East, Syria actually had a secular government that was committed to that in principle, and had a very liberal mufti.
The Grand Mufti of Syria, Dr. Ahmed Hassoun, and he used to be the Mufti of Aleppo, and now he becomes the Grand Mufti of Syria. He promotes tolerance. He promotes building relation and bridges with other religions. He's building a culture of non-violence among others. And he is an amazing person. So with the Grand Mufti and Sheikh Shahadi, I introduced them to Marc, and they have this beautiful relation. And the Grand Mufti of Syria decided, I want Marc to come and visit me in the mosque. So I said to him, that will be great. He said, why not he will come and he'll speak? And why don't we share the word of wisdom with others?
You know, the mosque is a male experience, and so she set me up with Nizar, and Nizar took me all the way to Aleppo on a 4-hour trip, and of course, as usual, I was nervous. I didn't know what I was going to expect. It was an unbelievable experience with 3,000 people there. It was a very difficult moment because I didn't know until later that half the people in the audience were refugees from Iraq who were homeless, and the pain and the suffering that was going on. And the Mufti was quite distraught because there were so many Shiites and Sunnis that were at war with each other inside Iraq at the time. It wasn't an easy moment, but it turned into a very beautiful experience.
The prophet Dawood said, "Who is the man who wants life, who loves the world and wants to see only good? Let him shun evil, pursue the good, and run after peace." I want to bless the children of Abraham and the children of Adam and Eve to run after peace with as much strength and as much vigor as they run after war.
The Mufti introduced me to a person who had been tortured in Abu Ghraib prison by American soldiers. And I was overwhelmed by that, and eventually I moved over to that person in front of a very large audience, and I embraced him and I asked for his forgiveness. And that story was something that moved the Mufti, and then when we moved into the larger group in front of the thousands of people, he told his people to film it. And they all took out their cell phones and started filming.
What do you think the key?
The key of what?
The key of what you did in a sentence or two.
Be genuine. Just be genuine. You have to be genuine and believe in the cause. This is, I think, this is what you need to do. Because you can know everybody and do it in the right time, but if you're not really genuine, you don't believe in the cause of where you're going, it's not going to happen.
I would say you had a good heart and you've got a good mind.
We had many goals, some of them more on the surface and some of them much more subtle. On the surface, we were interested in helping to promote civil society and interfaith tolerance in Syria. One of the biggest generalizations and stereotypes is that people inside an authoritarian political regime, that there's no difference. There's something called Syria, and that's it. And Syria does X, Y, and Z. Syria supports this, Syria does that. And it's simply completely false. The fact is that there's enormous diversity inside Syria, and it's very, very similar to the diversity we see in most cultures, in most nation states, and ethno-national regimes.
So we have all kinds of people sitting together, and through a big discussions, we encourage the culture of debate. And when we have Marc speaking about culture of peace, we invited all these people to ask him questions.
More subtly, we wanted to demonstrate the possibility of not only a relationship between Arabs and Jews and people, because everybody knew that I was traveling the region and that I'd worked for 10, 20 years in Israel. But we didn't want to push the Israel-Syrian thing. It was way too sensitive early on. Now, Israel and Syria are officially talking indirectly in Turkey and other places, in part because of our work. We set the early stage for the possibility of there being a connection in the region and a way to talk about things that were painful with grievances, but without hatred and without an intention of war.
We want to have better Syria, and we want to be open to the West and to know who we are.
We were facing a time when the United States had an administration that had actually decided on a violent relationship with Syria. They had decided to invest a lot of money in regime change, which means coup, which means revolution, and it would have been a destruction of the country of Syria in the same way that Iraq got destroyed. And I was intended on demonstrating that that was completely unnecessary and destructive and wasteful. I was going to demonstrate it to Washington, and I was going to demonstrate it to Jerusalem.
So when we have the threat of sanctioning Syria, I am worried because this is my people. I don't want anybody to die. And this is Marc. So we complete each other in this work.
Over time, year after year, more and more people in the intelligence community and in the think tanks started to realize that we were right, and they started to send more people to Syria. And over time, every time I went back to Jerusalem, more and more people from very high levels realized that we had a point. There was something to do with a new relationship with Syria. Same thing happened in Washington. And so that they started sending more and more high-level people. And basically, from what we're told, we helped avoid a war.
We went to Washington, and we were fighting for not sanctioning Syria. And like we were all against the war of Iraq. And look at now, we have 2 million refugees in Syria because of the war. And this is when Marc Gopin's work will become so important, because we want to have peace.
You have no idea the gratitude people felt that somebody from Washington was coming exactly when a lot of people didn't know when American bombs might be falling on Syria. Many people were afraid. They didn't know what to expect from this administration.
Or do you need, I mean, I would be honored to co-teach it.
I need all co-teaching.
If we designed that I could come for 7 days, and within those 7 days we had 2 intensive, times, we can do that.
It's a culture, it's a habit. Every year, once or twice, we'll have Marc in Damascus, and he'll deliver a talk, or we'll have a different programs. And even if we are a different opinion, it is fine, because we're together and we're working on, let's say, subject about how to fight poverty. So this is poverty. Even if you're a communist or you are a priest, or you are a Ba'athist, or you are a neocons, we all agree that we need to fight poverty.
And what we're saying is, look at the extremist groups. Look at what they're using. They're enacting the human rights that you say you stand for. They're the ones offering health care. They're the ones offering family support. So where are you? You're still with your big hammer.
How much we spend money in Middle East in killing each other. And with the present economic crisis, putting huge problems on government budget, we cannot to spend more fruitless war.
The amount of money that goes into peacemaking versus war making is a joke. There's billions over here and hundreds of thousands, if not a few million over here. And these are very real things that Congress people and others understand very, very well. Everyone knows that one is grossly underfunded and one is grossly overfunded, and there are very good political reasons for military-industrial complexes to invest in weapon systems because it pays for jobs, and those jobs pay for votes.
So the more fighting we do, the more money we spend, the less money we spend on the reforms. And of course, less chance for our countries in Middle East to get better.
Terror groups, extremist groups, build on human misery. They build on people being disempowered. And if our peace processes continue to disempower people, they're going to go for the extremists.
If I am not having for them any jobs, any school, they cannot get married, they cannot go to school, they cannot work. And later I tell them, you know what, support our cause. They're not going to support our cause. They're going to go to the people, to the other group who are really helping them to get through their difficult life, in fighting poverty, in getting better skills to get better jobs.
If you make a situation where people are getting wealthier and wealthier by good jobs, and there are laws that make kids have an equal opportunity, there's no reason to join a radical group. All of them just abandon it in waves. So if, even from a narrow Jewish point of view here, they want to be safe in the Middle East, they want to conquer their enemies, conquer them with love, respect, and jobs and equality.
It says Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
Now you're proving that I'm blind.
A candle for hope, compassion, trust, peace, and healing. May peace come.
This people-to-people work, the work of friends, and the friends that create change based on the networks of relationships, can matter a great deal in the choices for war or for peace in the minds of leaders, in the minds of military people. If 20 years ago, at the beginning of the Oslo process, the President of the United States and the Prime Minister of Israel and the head of the Palestinian Authority, Yasser Arafat, had been encouraged to say, we want at least once a month for every single Arab and Jew in this region to reach out and meet their neighbor and discuss with their neighbor how they're going to exist together, how they can work on water together, how can they work on protecting the children together. And they had empowered millions of people to reach out. Instead of suppressing all of that, we wouldn't be with Hamas right now. We wouldn't have a radical organization in charge of Palestine. Now we're stuck. We encouraged them to have elections. They elected this group in the midst of all of their misery and desperation, and then we didn't want to accept the election results. That's already a tragedy. How do we get there? We have to rethink the entire notion of how you solve conflicts, how you come back and pull back from people killing each other.
I want to see, before I die, a peace between Israel and the Arab world. I want to see, really, this is my objective. We do all this and thinking that this is what I want. I want to have peace between Israel and the Arab world. I want to see trade. I want to see good life for all the young generation. And I hope they will invite us for the signing ceremony.
בלילות הכי קרים אוחז אדם באמונה שימים מאושרים עוד מחכים לו בפינה כשהשמש מסתתרת ונשארת עננה יש סיכוי שהיא חוזרת רק בזכות האמונה כל אחד וכל אחת בכל לשון ומדינה נפרדים בשם הדת ונפגשים באמונה הנוצרי המוסלמי וגם הבן של